If you're a wine region affected by travel restrictions and uncertainty around in-person events, then Interpreting Wine's 100-day wine brand evolution playbook was made for you. This complete program leads and supports you step by step to implement multiple powerful marketing channels in your business. It's also guaranteed to deliver over 500 hours of wine trade engagement in 100 days or your money back. Learn more at interpretingwine.com/brochure. I'm Lawrence Francis, host of Interpreting Wine, the place to learn from thought leaders in the world of wine and marketing, welcoming you to the 2022 Wine Communication Series. Across these 6 episodes, I'll be exploring modern wine communication and marketing in the company of some of the world's leading wine podcasters, traveling virtually from Australia and New Zealand to North America via China, with the influence of podcasting and social audio forecast to grow yet again in 2022. Get ahead of the curve with this special series to be released every fortnight between January and March 2022. If you haven't already subscribed wherever you're listening, then sign up today so you don't miss an episode. We continue the series in the company of Boris Lamont of the New Zealand Wine Podcast. We hear his origin story and how he got started with the podcast. He talks us through his workflow and how he gets episodes online, discusses the evolution of the podcast and his style over that time, different types of episodes that he's experimented with. He shines a light on some of his recommended episodes to listen to, talks on-site setup when recording at wineries, shares how he gets his episodes listened to, and looks ahead for the future of the NZ Wine Podcast. Enjoy.
My first recording was back in early 2017, I think it was. Early 2017. So I have got a mate, Paul Spain, who runs podcast.nz, and he's been doing it for some time and has probably missed a podcast in New Zealand. He's got his own tech business and he's a little bit of a tech commentator as well. He'll pop up on Breakfast TV talking about different things. Anyway, I was talking with him about maybe doing something and doing a podcast, and we batted around a few ideas, and I looked at what people were doing, and no one was doing a podcast specifically focused on New Zealand wine. And since I had an interest and have an interest in wine, I thought, well, it could be a good one to get into and just have a little try and just stuff. I mean, I like technology. I do quite a few things in technology, so I like new things, and I like things that are developing and seeing where they're going and trying things out. So all those components sort of came together, and then I thought about what would it be. Listened to a few different podcasts that were available, and thought it'd be quite good to get people's stories, because for me, when I have a wine, it's the story. If you go and buy a wine at a vineyard and then you take it away and then you drink it, you remember the conversations you had and the place you were. And also, I think because New Zealand's such a young country for wine making, the stories are still quite new and fresh. And there's a lot of stories of people who are the groundbreakers and the ones who bought the land and planted the vines. So I thought it would be quite nice to capture those stories, whether they're winemakers or vineyard owners or whoever in the wine industry. Because I think, as I say, for me, that just gives that whole dimension and layer when you're drinking something as to how it came about, why it came about.
Is there a specific wine origin story? Like you say, you've had the interest in wine. Is there a sort of a particular reason or a particular sort of fork in the road that led you down the wine path?
No, I think it just developed. Sort of slowly developed, just to got more and more interested in wines. I certainly wasn't brought up around a lot of wine or anything like that, but I think just being in New Zealand, started drinking wine, had friends that were interested in wine as well. So that probably just merged together and culminated, and the timing was just such that that sort of helped encourage my interest. And I think when you start to get interested in something, then you just find people, don't you, along the way, because that's what you're looking out for. You're looking out for those things. And obviously being in New Zealand, it's quite accessible. There's a lot of different places you can go to in different regions. It's not hard to get to, and it's quite open and available, I suppose. And like food as well, like dining. So those sort of things go together. You get exposed to more. I was interested in what's on wine lists when I went to restaurants, and then started sort of thinking about things like really like pairing and wine matching, and find that quite interesting. So it just built out from there, I think. And as I say, just having some key friends as well who are quite interested, and I've been a bit lucky and been a bit spoiled over the years with access to some nice cellars that weren't my own.
Always a good entry point. Hey, I think, for me, I've had people along the way that have, I guess, shown me that kindness and told me those stories, and I think those sort of experiences can be very, very formative.
And I think you often find people that I've been lucky enough that they've been really keen to talk more and share with someone that appreciates their wine. And so been very lucky to have a couple of people that are keen to share it and happy to talk about it with someone that wants to listen and that appreciates it and is interested in it. And also, a couple that are into, a few friends that are also into, cooking as well. And obviously then you just get that whole wonderful combination of, great food and wine and a great occasion. And you just have these memorable moments, which are really, really special. And I think, if you've got that interest in someone who is, a bit of a wine vinophile and, loves their wine, often I think I've had a couple of comments where people go, oh, it's really nice to be able to share that with someone who's genuinely interested and also doesn't feel intimidated, like I'm quite open just to going, oh, this is all I know. Don't feel like I need to know more than I actually do, and happy just to be told and learn and enjoy the experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and there is so much to learn as well, isn't there? I've spoken with masters of wine who feel as though they've passed the exam and they still don't know anything, and they're still learning loads and loads. I just think that's one of the amazing things about wine. There's always new things occurring, and there's always more to learn. What I'd like to do actually, Boris, is just to really bring together, I guess, two of the things that you spoke about just then. You spoke about access to wineries and your location over there in New Zealand, but then also the podcast. So I wonder if you just talk us through almost your workflow, from putting together the podcast. Did it bring those two together? Were you actually traveling out to wineries and interviewing winemakers at the winery itself?
Yeah, so I did. One of the really fortunate things is of partnering up with Paul is that Paul Spain at podcast.nz, is that he's got a studio set up. So he's got a full studio set up I could just walk into, and he generously just gave me access to everything I needed and showed me what to do. And again, it's good. It's not too complicated to record stuff, and especially when you've got half decent gear. And so the first few I did just in the studio and had people come in just through contact. So Bob Campbell was episode number 1. who's one of our probably most prominently well-known wine critic.
And where are you physically located then, or where was the studio?
Auckland. Yeah. So that's in Auckland. So the studio is in Auckland. Yeah. So generally, I'm based in Auckland. Given the times we've had, sort of been a little bit here and there, but yeah. So we just started doing the first few in the studio, and then I also had a couple of friends who are very good on French wine. Jean-Christophe, he owns a French wine importing business in Auckland. And so we also did a little bit of a series in the studio on the real basics of French wine, just making it really simple, just even talking about the regions and what that means and why Burgundy is called a Burgundy. And just because part of, I think, what I wanted to do and what I like doing was making it accessible for people, just removing those barriers, removing that sort of any intimidation, just going, hey, it's just about this, and you can just like what you like. And then, started just getting in touch with a few more wineries and taking the gear that the remote recording gear and going out to wineries around Auckland, just down to I think down to Clevedon, to Puriri Hills, with Judy Fowler was one of the early ones. That's not far, sort of outside of Auckland, and then a few more up north, up Matakana way. Just sort of getting around it, and it is quite nice to be able to do that, to be able to, I think, get on site and record on location, even though you could argue it doesn't feel that different to when you're listening to it. Yeah, I think there is something nice to have that be in the environment when you're talking to whoever it is. Yeah.
Yeah, there's usually more wine around, hey? If you go to the wine.
There's that as well. Yeah. So so did a bit of travelling around, and then I suppose just when I was in different regions, then also just taking the gear with me. So have done a couple of trips down to Central Otago, and so just taking the recording gear with me and gone to visit a few different people down there, and it's a nice excuse too, just to call people up and they go, oh hey, I'm doing this, are you interested? And you get to rock up and see what they're doing, and sometimes you get sort of driven around and taken to different parts of the vineyard that you might not necessarily see, and if you were just sort of someone rocking up, so that's been really nice as well, just to see a little bit more of where the grapes actually come from, which is I find really interesting too, especially around Central Otago, because there's some really diverse terroir, I suppose, for where the plantings are.
Sort of taking me back really to when I started the podcast, when I started interpreting wine, and I was living over in Spain, and it was just that, it was everything was very mobile, and was able to sort of take my handy recorder, as it's called, and then just be at the winery. I completely agree. I think it does make a difference, and again, it's always been, I think, important for me to see where the winery is, because I do feel that story around what is the size of the winery, what is the type of equipment they have, the size of vessel, the material of the vessel, the way that things are laid out. I just think that so much of that is also kind of free information to me as a communicator. So I like to get that wherever possible.
Yeah, that's right. And I think in telling people's stories, it's nice to hopefully try and convey a little bit of that feel for where the vineyard is and where the wine's made as well. So hopefully that sort of comes across a bit in the story. Yeah.
Absolutely, and we may well get a bit techie and geeky later on, and just get into, I think, some of the practicalities, of how you went about recording when you were sort of out and about. But something that I'd be very keen to to guide you towards, and I think it will be interesting for you as well. Would maybe just be to sort of, as we are sat here, October 2021, almost kind of take a look back, kind of look back over your path, and maybe just sort of, summarize kind of how far you've come, really, just in a broad sense, in terms of like how many episodes that you've produced. Has your style, would you say, kind of change, and maybe even your focus in terms of the guests that you kind of had on over that period?
Yeah. I think we're up to episode 74, and I've got a few more recordings that are just finishing off now. And yeah, the focus initially was around sort of, it's always been quite broad, anyone in the wine industry. And as I said, we started with Bob Campbell, and then we did actually do some sort of 101s on French wine, which was to just help people get a bit of a flavour for when you're talking about different styles and things. And I thought that was sort of quite nice to do, although a little bit sort of off-centre for the New Zealand Wine Podcast. I did last season for 2020 also do some harvest updates around a few of the different regions. So just had some of the winemakers talk for about 5 or 10 minutes on how that year was looking. So quite keen to do that again this year. That will have to be remote though this year. But yeah, that's, I suppose, was a new thing, and a lot of what I do is just what I think I enjoy. And I thought it's quite nice just to hear from the winemakers how it's shaping up, so be looking to do that for 2021 as well. Just talk to a few from the different regions, say how's it looking, is there any varietal you're particularly excited about? So yeah, that's something that's come about over the last year. And yeah, I suppose just the style does develop, but more around, and I'm still the complete amateur, but more around, I suppose, interviewing technique and getting those stories from people, and maybe when you hear something, you go, oh, that's a good thing to maybe ask a few more questions about, because that's really interesting, and whereas the person who's talking might just gloss past it, because for whatever reason, and, just picking up on that and going, oh, okay, maybe just talk a bit more about that, and also, I suppose, just doing a bit more research beforehand, so you're already maybe aware of some of the points or things that might be of interest to listeners.
Yeah, amazing, and it's probably getting a bit meta now, but I'd certainly reflect that back to you, because I think getting to 74 episodes and having that quality content out there, I think you're far from an amateur. I think podcasting is one of those really interesting channels, really, because I think a lot of people seem to think that it's not for them to use, and I sort of have these different drums that I try to beat over time, and one of the drums that I was beating for a long time is that I see podcasting very much as social media. I see it very much as it's social in terms of anybody can do it. Nobody gets intimidated about setting up a Facebook profile or setting up an Instagram profile, but there does seem to be some intimidation or some trepidation, if you like, around starting a podcast. But it's really not that complicated. And then obviously the media part, this is leading on audio rather than written word, as it for blogs or videos or pictures for something like Instagram. So I think hats off to you for getting out there and really being a trailblazer, I think, in your local region.
Well, thanks. Well, I think, and maybe you just touch on something I hadn't. I do enjoy audio. I listen to a lot of podcasts, I suppose. And I've always enjoyed. Show my age. I sort of grew up when radio was still a thing. And
I think there's still one or two out there.
There's still one or two. Yeah, that's right. And And I think it's, it's a medium that's lasted as well, because there is something different. It's like, books have lasted because it's different. Reading is, I love reading. It's just a totally different experience reading a novel than to watching something. And I think audio just still gives you that bit more of your imagination to fill in the blanks a bit more. And but also it has that, you can listen to them in the car, you can be doing something else, and you can still be paying attention to what's going on. Yeah.
You've spoken about the wineries, and you've spoken about the giving the sort of the French wine series or episodes that you've had there. Have there been any other types of episodes or any other types of guests that you've had on over that time?
Cameron Douglas, our master sommelier. So he was on sort of pretty early on, and then some more people like Sir Graham Avery from Cellini, and he's now that's now been he's sold off. A couple of authors, I think, who've written a couple of New Zealand wine books. A Seat at the Table. Just trying to remember, that's the film about NZ wine and how it's represented offshore. I'm just trying to remember the chap's name for that, but
so it was actually
David Nash,
filmmaker.
Yeah. He's produced a film about New Zealand wine, David Nash, and so he was on talking about that. So we have had a few sort of other, in the sort of the more peripheral, but mainly vineyard owners and winemakers. And all people have come to it through all sorts of different ways. Some people came to New Zealand and already had the wine experience and were looking for somewhere. Others were just were doing something else completely different in New Zealand and thought, I've had enough of that, and I'll go and do just start a winery like Providence up in Marikana. So quite a few different types of stories, and again, that's part of the the youth of the wine industry in New Zealand, that we get this sort of variety.
I've always said unashamedly that winemakers are my favorite to interview, and it's probably why in my 450 odd episodes, more than 170 have been winemakers, and it probably shows a strong preference from myself. But I'm unapologetic about that completely, because one of the things that I think is very much missing for me from the content side of things around wine is actually the voice of the winemaker. I totally get that winemakers are busy. They work really ridiculously hard, and they're super engaged in their operations and in selling their wine and in servicing their customer. But I very strongly feel that actually the sort of the wine world would have much more attraction, I think, to the person that hasn't kind of gone down the rabbit hole yet, if we're able to get the voice of the winemaker more out there. And I think that what you're doing, kind of rocking up, making it easy, putting the mic in front of them and guiding them through that recording process, and then having the channel to distribute that. I think that's a really important service, if you like, that you're providing, because you are then broadcasting and getting the voice of the winemaker out there too. A lot of people who may be in their lives, they may never have met a winemaker. I think sometimes we kind of don't appreciate necessarily how lucky we are in the wine trade to get such close contact. Yeah, no,
it's a good point. And I think it's nice, I think, to think that those stories are there too. But once you've got them, you've captured them, because someone's story will continue on, and things will get added to their story. But a lot of your story stays the same, So someone could listen to, something about a Akitu wines in, 3 years' time, 4 years' time, it's still relevant, So, Andrew Donaldson's story is still relevant, even if they listen to it, which I quite like, that the content, certainly the harvest updates are time relevant, but a lot of the stories are, to a large degree, hold up even years later. They're still relevant.
I'm going to ask you the question I think that every podcaster hates, which is to say that if there's anybody listening who hasn't tuned in to any of your content before,
mm-hmm.
is there a particular, and I'll even, help or hinder you here, is there a particular Winemaker episode that kind of stands out for you that you think this would be the one where I'd recommend somebody starting, and maybe give us a sense of why do you feel that?
Yeah, it's a hard one because I think different ones have different appeal, for different reasons. I think, it was really nice talking with Grant Taylor from Barley Vineyards because of his history and pedigree in Central Otago. So, I really enjoyed that, and I think that because he's also done a few different things, and he's a winemaker and a vineyard owner as well. So, he's got that sort of deep-seated passion, but an understanding of the wine business, too. So that's certainly a good one, I think.
What's the episode number there, if people want to...
is 25. That's number 25 for Grant. And I think also talking with John Hancock, who was one of the sort of early founders of wineries in New Zealand too. Fairly early when we're not sort of talking way back, sort of the first ones out in sort of West Auckland, but over probably now sort of more than 35 years, came here from Australia, helped set up Morton Estate, was part of Trinity Hill as well. And, so his is interesting, went through Roseworthy in Australia, I think pretty sure he did way back. He's sort of one of the very first people to go through there. But just, and a good storyteller as well. So which is always good to get, isn't it? Someone who's just able to tell their story well, and then just nice sort of, I suppose, then coming through to some of the younger winemakers like Renee Dale and Dave Sutton at Takano. Hearing sort of what they're doing as well, and what they're bringing and what their thinking is. So it is. I don't want to sort of make it sound like a cop out, but it is hard to pick one favourite. But I suppose John Hancock sort of has a nice sort of breadth to it.
And when you've got a few episodes, people can always start somewhere and then explore the rest of them. So I don't think you.
And I'm very much, like you're
not saying just listen to that one and don't listen to any others.
No, and I'm
saying to start your journey there.
Yeah, and it's okay to. I listen, as I say, I listen to lots of stuff, and I don't make myself listen to all of anything if it's not particularly hitting the mark for me. So I certainly encourage people just try ones, and you go, oh yeah, this resonates with me. But if it doesn't, you don't you don't have to stick it out. You can sort of go because it might just be what's of interest to you at this time.
Amazing, and I guess to kind of pick up the idea, and you very genuinely think of you being a bit of a trailblazer in your local region. I'm just curious then, like what has that sort of, I guess, meant for you over that time? I guess maybe aside from the recording part and the actual content that you're putting out there. I mean, presumably, and I know that you've got an Instagram account and emails and contact details and all of these other ways that people can get in touch with you. Has that meant that since you've put yourself out there as the NZ Wine Podcast, that you've had a lot of contact from, say, wineries or PR agencies or any other sort of marketing groups or any other groups really related to wine, and that has sort of, as I say, set you out there as the person to contact?
Yeah, I think I certainly you start to get approached more and more now. I think now that you've got more content out there, so getting people reaching out to me now, which is nice. A couple of marketing agencies that look after different wineries have approached me, and so we've been able to put a few of the people they work with, have a chat with them. Yeah, so that's been quite good, and people reaching out through Instagram too. But yeah, I'm it's very much a hobby type thing for me, and so I think, as I said to you before, I'm a little bit slack on posting. I've got a few ideas and things, but it's finding the time to sort of get things out there. But yeah, it certainly, as it's grown and people have become heard about it a bit more often, it's quite nice sort of you're not sort of chasing, looking for stuff all the time. You're starting to be approached, and people know what you're doing, which is nice.
Yeah, absolutely, and hopefully we can send some Interpreting Wine listeners over to you as well, and they can have a deep dive into New Zealand wine. I mean, it is a region that I've covered a fair amount, I would say, on the podcast, but obviously a lot of it is opportunity driven. It's been in the UK when there's been New Zealand winemakers here, rather than actually going there and visiting the people on the ground.
Well, hopefully soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Fingers crossed. I'm curious, like the reaction to the vintage episodes, because to me they sound like really unique. I've never specifically done those on the podcast, and I think those sound like something where you may well have gotten some interesting kind of feedback or reactions to.
They've been pretty well received. I think it's like anything, you've got to get that consistency right, and I think if I do them again this year, and then people go, oh, okay, I can look forward to these coming out sort of next year and regularly, and get the winemakers into the swing of it as well. It'll be a nice thing, and I don't know. It's pretty simple in some ways. I just do what interests me,
Yeah.
And that's of interest to me. I go, I wonder what the wine's going to be like this year. I wonder how the harvest has been, and you hear little snippets, and you think of how the summer's been, and during ripening and all that sort of stuff, and you go, I wonder what sort of a year it's going to be. And obviously last year was interesting because in New Zealand here, we were in our, very strict lockdown during harvest. So that first one I did was really interesting, just hearing how people cope with that. And they were really fortunate because of the weather, because they couldn't have as many pickers as they would normally have. So, it's just interesting to hear how they're seeing it, and hearing how they think it stacks up to prior years as well.
Yeah. No, I love that. I think it's something that I've come across with a few different podcasters actually. I remember Chris Scott, who does the UK Wine Show. He spoke about scratching his own itch really, and he's got another wine training company, and that is his main thing, and the podcast is very much his own learning and his opportunity to kind of get in front of those people that he wants to, and when you've got a track record and you've got a show, a broadcast channel, an audience that you built up over that time, then I think that's very valuable to those wineries. And I think, as you're saying here, a lot of that resistance around, who is this person contacting me and what do they want? And in my experience, that a lot of that goes away really, because I think it does come across, and people can tell, when you're coming from a genuine place.
And I think that maybe comes back around to that point you made around there's a lot more opportunity for podcasts. I mean, I totally agree with that. I think it's still a bit of an untapped area, and not sure completely why, I suppose, going to your point about everyone sort of embrace social media. But, and I think in business, it's a real untapped area of being able to communicating out there, but in a, has to be a way that of value, like, to give value to whoever your audience is. But if you're genuine and interested in the topic, then that's a big start, right? Because then there's most likely to be other people who are interested in things that you're interested in. And this connected world allows, even if that interest is quite niche, it allows other people to access that niche, right? Because it's much easier to find anything that might be quite specific. Yeah.
Yeah, well, 100%, and again, it's all sort of looping back together. But I very much feel as though a winery podcast could be very interesting. Actually, just a winemaker down in Central Otago. We'll pick on Dave Sutton, because I have come across him once or twice. Online, and we've spoken, and I personally, I'd love to hear the Takano podcast and hear what Dave makes of the ripening, as he's going through the season. What is Dave up to in the height of winter? Your July, what's going on over there? Because I think, within the wine world, we do obsess, and rightly so, around what happens at vintage and the conditions at vintage. But qualifications like Master of Wine and even, I think, looking into the sort of the Master Sommelier type world, or just the sommelier world more generally, I think there's an interest among those people to know more, not just to kind of go by the textbook, to go deeper. And I really feel that really strong communicators, who a lot of winemakers are, could be out there with a little, audio piece of equipment and sharing that. And I absolutely think that people would listen.
Like a diary, almost. Yeah, winemaker's diary. Yeah.
Why not? Yeah. Why not at all? So, and that really, again, comes back to something that I wanted to ask you earlier, which was, when you kind of took your show on the road, really, and came out of the studio and started going to wineries and recording on location, give us a sense of the equipment that you had, and maybe let's talk about what was the final kind of setup, really, that you settled on as your preferred way to rock up and do those episodes on site.
Yeah, well, again, I was fortunate in having, Paul stay there, because he just basically said, "Here's the gear. It's this nice little kit for going and doing a remote recording." And I was just like, "Oh, great, okay." And so I can't even. It's a very small piece of kit, but I think it's actually quite nice quality. We've got some decent mics. So I take two mics. I can't even tell you what the makers of this piece of
but
kit.
a couple of like independent mics, and then they plug into the thing. I stick on headphones. Yeah, so I can hear exactly how it's sounding. And then I have another pair there that I offer to the guest as well, and say, look, if you want it, if you're comfortable and you want to put them on, but you don't have to, you can just talk, and I'll make sure we get the balance right. And then, it's just a matter of, you do your sort of trials with it before you go out on site, and make sure that it's recording properly, and you've got, how to get the balance right between the two mics, and just having that little conversation with them about, if I go like this, it means your mic's too far away, or just say, hey, that's okay. I can stop it and just tell you that.
and just making people comfortable, I suppose, with the process. And I say just at any time you can just go, oh, I didn't really like the way I said that. Can we redo that? That's no problem. We'll just redo it, and it's all completely editable. So just putting people at ease, I think, around. But yet most people will say, oh, well, I don't know if I'll be able to talk for half an hour. So, we'll just get started. You might surprise yourself. Yeah. And most people
it's super interesting. Yeah, it's super interesting to hear a bit of the workflow, really. Yeah, and I think I can definitely relate to all of those things. And it's huge. Often for me, it's just a question of sometimes people can stop a bit short with that first answer, and then once you get on the same wavelength and they realize it's okay to talk. I think we've maybe been I don't know what the right word is, maybe conditioned, I guess, to that we only have a short window of people's attention, that we have to say what we've got to say in 10 seconds or we're going to lose them. And I think that's where, for me, podcasting is very much not like that. And I see that in the numbers, really. As an example, I released my longest ever episode earlier in 2021, which was an interview with Juan Munoz Oca from Chateau Saint Michel in the Washington State area. And it was an hour and a half. It's a feature length episode, and I was scared that may have been too much. But when it went live, the average engagement with that was 50 minutes, 50. And it's like, and he was a fascinating storyteller, telling us about some of the geological impacts that had taken place in the region that created that very unique terroir there, and information that I was not able to find in podcast format. And I think that having it told by an expert and having it told in an engaging way, there almost isn't a time limit on that. So I'm sure once you get the winemakers and your guests talking, then you maybe have the opposite problem, running out of story. That's right. Well, I've landed on around the 30 to 35 minute mark as being, I think, a good length. And I have had others that are good talkers and good storytellers, and for them I've just split it up into 2 episodes. It's interesting to think whether you need to do that or not, because again, when I listen to podcasts, I just listen to it. If it's interesting enough, then I'll stop it if I've got to go and do something else, and then you can just come and hit play again, right? So it may not actually be necessary to split it into parts. Might be sort of my thinking there might not be correct. So and it might be nice, just to try out a longer one and see how that rolls. Because it's all on demand, and you can stop and start it when you want anyway, can't you? So, but that's where I've sort of got to with and I think for most people that seems to fit quite well with them, sort of talking through a bit of their history and how they got to be doing what they're doing, and then having time to talk about what they're doing and a little bit about what they're thinking into the future as well. Another element that I'm probably quite known for, and that I was quite early to latch onto, was that idea of series, where maybe I would group together New Zealand winemakers or Austrian winemakers. And I'm just curious your thoughts on that. Is that something that you've explored, or is that something that you're open to exploring?
Yeah, I have. I think it is. It's a nice idea to do a series. To have that, have some sort of continuity across something, and give it a theme and a bit of a focus to, rather than just having each one as being independent. So one of the things I've got in mind is maybe doing a series on Māori winemakers and winery owners. I thought that might be quite a nice thing to do as a set of podcasts, and what perspective they bring to winemaking and ownership of the vineyards and the land and that sort of thing. I thought that could be quite a nice thing to do. But I think you're right. It is nice to have a series, I think, and just give people a bit of a focus.
Yeah. And sorry, I mean, again, putting you on the spot a little bit, but is there anything to add more broadly about that conversation? Because I'm very aware that it's not something that I've ever featured. You know, all of the New Zealand winemakers I've ever had have been sort of, I don't know what you sort of call them there, but kind of white origin, I guess.
Yeah. It's just something that's interesting to explore, around what the indigenous culture, the Māori culture for New Zealand brings to that process. And I think it would be interesting just that blend of, where, the heritage of wine and where it's come from, and as I said before, the youth of the wine industry in New Zealand, and then sort of overlaying the sort of Māori approach to the land and harvesting and that sort of type of process as well would be interesting for layers.
One thing I did want to ask you about in terms of growing your impact is around distribution. And I'm just curious, when you kind of first started, and you did the Bob Campbell episode, and you got that out there. What was the experience, or what was the process like around getting it heard? Because that's obviously important, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. Well, again, I just come back to being under the podcast.nz umbrella. Paul and Selena had that all set up for me, which was huge advantage for me, just to be able to slot into that. And they knew they had the tools and knew where to put it and knew how to tag it and all that sort of stuff to start getting it heard. And they did. Paul's got a few different podcasts that he puts out there, so got a few mentions on there just to get it up and running. And then I think pretty early on got into the social media sort of piece of it as well, I think, just to promote it out there, because that's where people are looking for things, right? And then also just encouraging people that I spoke with to push it out on their own channels too.
Is it a sort of a more of a formal relationship you have then with Podcast NZ and part of their stable of content? Yeah. I do it under their umbrella. Paul does, a few different shows, and then there's other people who do shows under that umbrella as well. So it's quite nice just having that community too, it being part of that. Not just feeling like you're out there yourself. But certainly, huge advantage having access to the studio and the software. And for me, it's very interesting what we've been speaking about, and it feels as though we potentially both agree on, in terms of, there being opportunity for more podcasters around wine, and certainly, there are lots of New Zealand wine stories out there as well, and I'm just curious, if there are any New Zealand wineries or sommeliers or anyone else really associated with the wine industry there who's listening. What would you say to them if they have gone through that process and kind of had thought about starting a podcast but hadn't quite got there? Are there any particular words of encouragement that you might send out to them?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably more accessible than you might think it is. It's like anything, once you sort of get started and finding out. And I think there are people around who could help you out as well, so you don't need to just go and just bash away at it yourself. and just put out a few feelers. And yeah, I mean, I'm happy to sort of chat to people for sure about how they might get started and what are the key things that they need to think about and have in place if they're wanting to do it. But it's like a lot of things in technology, the tools are getting easier, and it's getting easier to both record good quality and to edit. So there's lots of editing tools now, and then it's Simplecast is the platform that we use, and that's really intuitive, just loading up your content and getting it up there. And I haven't had to. I'm sure there's lots of online help too around sort of tips and tricks for getting your audio correct and in the right format for uploading. Just coming back around to that, you don't, if you're interested in it, then it's highly likely someone else is interested in it too. And the interconnected world we live in means that you can reach those people and they can find your content.
Again, one of the drums that I've been beating for a while, and I'm sort of starting to beat it again now, is really around regions like New Zealand, and I would put Australia in the same category as well, because they are making wine, obviously in their location, but a large percentage of that is being consumed the other side of the world, even if we just think about the UK and the US. And I think that maybe some of the fragility of the system of let's all get on a plane as New Zealand winemakers and go over to London or go over to Pro Wine, or the reverse, where they were bringing people over, where they're bringing the sommeliers over from the States and London and Europe. And, there's actually, there's a lot of assumptions, I think, built into that system, which is that international travel is always going to be there. And if nothing else, the last 18 months have taught us that, those underlying assumptions can just be swept away in a matter of weeks. And I just feel like the quality of interaction that a podcast can give you, it's not going to be the same as being stood together in person. It's always nicer to have that. But I personally see and believe that it approximates that one-to-one or kind of one-to-many in a masterclass. It approximates that interaction, I think, better than anything else out there. So let's see. I really think that hope there's people that take you up on your kind of offer and your challenge, because I think there's so much opportunity.
Yeah, no, you're right, and it is an avenue and a medium that people can harness right now. They don't need to think, that's closed now, we can't get there. What you're trying to do is communicate to those markets and to those people, and you can do that through other medium like podcasting.
100%. Okay, and for me, it's been great to speak with a fellow podcaster as part of this series, and I'm really enjoying bringing these different voices from all around the world. I'd like to close in typical interpreting wine style, really, and just ask you to look ahead, because I think it's very interesting. You mentioned you're having a little mid-season break at the moment, and maybe that's giving you a little bit of time to reflect and look ahead and think about what might be next. And you've already spoken about the Maori series, and I'm just curious, is there anything else that's sort of on the horizon moving into 2022?
Yeah, and I think it's been great talking with you. It's always good to get a bit more inspiration, and which is really good. And yes, I think doing those themes would be quite a nice thing to start to build in. And then as I say, get sort of regular on the harvest updates as well. And I think we did maybe sort of 4 regions, so maybe do a few more regions as well. And there's a bit of work in that because you have to coordinate with the different winemakers, so it's not just like one call doing the thing for the episode. You have to do sort of 4 calls or 5. Try to sort of 4 or 5 is probably about 5's maybe a bit too many. 4's about enough to hear from one region because you start getting a bit of repetition. And yeah, I think just also for me is just making sure that I look back over the 74 and sort of look ahead to the next 20, 26 or so, getting up to 100, make sure I've got quite a nice coverage of, both, regions, age as well of people on I'm talking to, making sure talking with women and men and getting that whole sort of mix right across the, all the different aspects, I suppose. Yeah.
If you know someone who would enjoy this episode, please share the direct link, which is interpretingwine.com/459. And if you really enjoyed tuning in, please leave the episode an iTunes review on the same link, which really helps people find the podcast. Of course, please see below for Boris's NZ Wine podcast website, from where you can find all episodes of his podcast. And of course, I would love to have you following along with me on social media, where I'm at Interpreting Wine on Instagram and Facebook, at Wine Podcast on Twitter, and email hello@interpretingwine.com. Next time on the 2022 Interpreting Wine Communication Series in episode 460, I'll be speaking with Emily Steckenborn, host of Bottled in China podcast. So make sure you're subscribed to be alerted when the episode goes live. See you then.